Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Thrilled to have you here. It's been so much fun doing these live interviews. We're going to be rebroadcasting them as audio only on the podcast. You can go to bizbookpublishinghub.com to hear all about it. But first, let me introduce this week's panel. Staring at a blinking cursor at the top of an empty page. That's the image I had in my head when I started thinking about writing my first book, and it almost made me quit before I even began my author journey. 3 published books later, I can say from experience that there are a lot of ways to write a book, and there's only one you shouldn't do, which is do it all on your own. Even if writing comes easy for you, you would still benefit from conversations and input from your prospective readers. Being in a community of fellow writers and authors will help you identify new opportunities and realize when hiring help is the best next move. That's why I founded the Biz Book Publishing Hub. I've gathered more than 50 experts who help entrepreneurs become successful authors. Our hub partners will help you navigate the complexities of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing your business book. And you'll realize that publishing is not the finish line. It's the latest you should start marketing your business book. Writing a book can be a lonely experience, but it doesn't have to be. Surrounding yourself with fellow writers and authors could help you get going and meet your author goals. This free resource is available at bizbookpublishinghub.com, where you'll also find out about the free Hub community virtual networking events that I host throughout the year and show notes with all the links from our guests on the Biz Book Publishing Hub podcast. Before we dive into today's panel, here's a quick word from our sponsor. With me today are 3 authors. Dan Gingiss wrote The Experience Maker, How to Create Remarkable Experiences That Your Customers Can't Wait to Share. Dan points out in the book that a positive customer experience is the way to stand out in a competitive marketplace. Nikki Soulsby wrote Lies I Told Myself and Other Truths, How to Squash the Mental Monsters and Live Your Dreams, a candid and reflective memoir that explores personal truths, growth, and self-realization, offering insights into overcoming internal and external challenges. Steve Yacovelli wrote Your Queer Career, Workplace Advice from the Gay Leadership Dude to guide LGBTQ plus professionals in navigating workplace challenges, building leadership skills, and thriving in their careers with a focus on embracing authenticity and inclusion. Please join me in welcoming Dan, Nikki, and Steve. Dan, I'm going to throw this first question to you. I would love to know who you had in mind as your audience, as your prospective readers when you were first working on this book.
Well, thanks, Robbie, so much for having me here, and honored to be here with Nikki and Steve as well. I came from corporate America. I worked for companies you've probably heard of, McDonald's, Discover Card, Humana, and I was involved in customer experience. And I saw how difficult it was to get things done and how hard it was to get budget and IT approval and brand approval and so many hoops to jump through. And I just wanted to make it easier for people. So whether they're in small businesses, medium or large, customer experience is a way to differentiate. And I think it's the last true way to differentiate. And I really wanted to create a book that allowed people to focus on simple, practical, and inexpensive ideas for improving experience instead of having to go through these massive process changes and multi-million-dollar IT projects, which frankly doesn't get you to the right place anyway. So that's really who I was thinking about, was anybody in business who knows that customer experience is important and just needs a little nudge to kind of have it be a little bit of an easier process and frankly, to make it more fun.
I appreciate that. I'm sure the people who are reading the book do as well. Nikki, what about you? Who was the intended audience for your book?
Well, obviously, knowing nothing about publishing or anything before I started, my intended audience was everyone. I was the person that was like, I'm going to publish this book and it's going to be a New York Times bestseller because I'm a good writer. Yeah, that's not really how it works. So
keeping it real, though, keeping it real. This is what most people do think when they don't really know. I mean, this is people listening are like, right, that's my plan too.
Yeah. So what I learned on the back end, I will get back to just one second. On the back end, I learned that people like Robbie are lifesavers, and you should absolutely work with people like that, because if you try to do it all on your own, you will find out that just doing it by yourself doesn't mean you're instantly a New York Times bestseller. But I wrote the book for people who were like me, I guess now 7 years ago, which is people who were mostly women who were incredibly frustrated and stuck and working their brains out and getting absolutely nowhere despite being the hardest working person that they could possibly know. And I did that for about a decade, got done with it. And then in 18 months, absolutely changed my life with these little tiny tweaks, primarily focused on limiting beliefs. And the bad news about limiting beliefs is everybody has them. The good news is that once you know how to deal with them, you know how to deal with them. So yeah, that's who I wrote it for, is for people who wanted to not be as frustrated.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Steve, what about you? Who was the likely reader that you had in mind?
Yeah, for my last two books, it was Pride Leadership, Strategies for the LGBTQ plus leader to be the king or queen of their jungle. And then the latest book this year, Your Queer Career. It's kind of obvious in the titles who's intended for the audience. Really trying to focus the energy on helping LGBTQ plus professionals who are either starting their career, mid-career, or even at that senior toward the end of the road kind of mentality, but thinking through how they can be even more successful wherever they're at in their workplace.
Steve, you've had two books. I want to take you back to the moment you were writing your first book. What were the success metrics that you had in mind in that early stages? Like, you've learned so much since then, but what were you tracking then to help you know that first book was going to be a success?
It's funny, truth be told, Your Queer Career that came out this year is actually my fifth one. But don't be impressed, because my first one was my dissertation, because I'm like, hey, I did all this work, let's just get the ISBN credit, woohoo. And I think like my mom bought it or something like that. And then I did my first commercial success, or no, not success, first commercial attempt, self-publishing. For me, I know some people have great success. For me, that was a disaster. And then Pride Leadership was the one you're talking about, Robbie. And that I thought, you know what, I finally got the help I needed, and I'm excited. I have a team. This is great. And I had, just like Nikki was saying earlier, my success was New York Times, best-selling author, Amazon #1. And that was what I thought was going to be the right thing. Completely not for me. And it really turns out that by the time I got to Your Queer Career, which is about a 5-year span between those two books, it really was more about the notoriety and getting the story out there versus the accolades and the number of sales and the dollar amount made. Because if you're trying to do this to make a gazillions of dollars, unless you're like an Oprah or a Brene Brown, maybe not going to happen for you. You might get lucky, who knows? But I was really trying to think of it more as, how does this add to my thought leadership street cred? And I'm definitely seeing that traction for both the books now.
I'm going to circle back to you about kind of the latest on that front in a moment. But first, let me go over to Dan. Dan, is this the first book that you wrote?
Second. And I too self-published my first book.
Yeah. So tell me, let's just take you back then to your first book. Listen, this is really helpful for those listening to hear this journey that you were all on. So tell me what you were keeping track of as far as success metrics for that first book, and what may have changed as you were approaching your second book.
Well, the first book was, I would say, dedicated to a very niche audience. I had just started in one of my roles as the head of social media for one of the major brands I worked for. And I immediately did not love social as a marketing channel. I still don't, to be honest. But I loved the fact that it was an engagement channel. I loved that it was the first opportunity in our lifetimes for consumers to talk to brands, to have a relationship with brands in a way that just wasn't possible. I was one of those nerdy kids that used to write letters to brands, hoping that they would, send me a letter back with some stickers or something. That's how you had to do it. And now all of a sudden social opened up this new world. So I wrote a whole book about customer service in social media, and I self-published it. And I think the goal there was really just to sell books. That was kind of my idea. I was still working in corporate America. And what I learned from it was, some people will say, especially, I know you're a speaker as well, some people will say the riches are in the niches. I think I might have niched in too tight on that book, because it was very appealing to people who were in social media customer service, but there just wasn't that many of those people. And so in the second book, I really tried to hit a broader audience, not quite everyone like Nikki did, but certainly a broader corporate audience.
Were you paying attention early on to that first book around book sales then? And like that was sort of what you were hoping to do? Like the individual book sale was all you really had in your head was.
Yeah, that was the measurement. And frankly, it was also the goal when the second book launched. And I know we're going to get to this, so I won't reveal the spoiler, but I have since learned that was the wrong goal. And we'll come back to it.
And we will. I do this as a part one, part two, because I know that now you look at the books, and that's why I also think people write multiple books, because there's so much we learn through the writing of the first book. And I just committed to writing my fourth one. So it just you keep learning and growing. Nikki, what, you were aiming for number one of something. You're like, I want to be number one. Was that, did you have any sense of what it was going to take for you to hit number one on Amazon or number one on?
Absolutely not. No, I had no idea. I thought it would just automatically do it. I thought if it was good, which it is, it is good. I didn't realize the whole scope of what it takes to actually have a successful book out there. And also how many books you have to sell to recoup what you spent to make the book happen in the first place. But when I saw that, like, oh, I sold 100 books in the first day, I'm like, woo, that's what's up. And then, kind of.
Well, here's the thing. I actually was thinking to mention, I've asked people this question a lot in the last couple of months, but and it's different stats out there. But does anyone have a suggestion for how many books the average author sells in the first year? Does anyone know a number?
I feel like if it's self-published, I think it's less than 250.
It's 100 is the number that I've heard most. That's the one I've heard the most consensus on. 10,000 books in the first year puts you in the upper echelon. And people have this like idea that they're going to easily sell like 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 books in that first year. But they don't actually have a plan for it. Like it's like automatically is definitely like their plan. Like it's just going to happen. So selling books one by one is not the way we make money. It's definitely about, the speaking and the other things. We're going to get to the business side of this in a moment, but I would like to just circle back now. Nikki, what do you think of now when you think of the success metrics to your book? What's been important to you now? Is it speaking opportunities or reviews? Like what's been sort of on your radar?
I would say primarily speaking opportunities, not to put the cart before the horse, but I didn't have a business when I wrote the book. I thought the book would be the book and it would be, again, wildly successful and I wouldn't have to work ever again. That's not how it worked out. But because I wrote the book, I got a speaking engagement. And because I got a speaking engagement, I got another one. And then I got some coaching clients. And then I had to figure out how to do all those things. So now for me, what's successful about the book is it gives me enough credibility to do other things that might bring in more money than, the $4 that I make on a book sale.
Steve, what about you? What's the success metrics that you're tracking these days for knowing your book's doing well?
Yeah, and I laugh, Nikki, because it's very similar experience to me. And I wrote the book, at least for Pride Leadership, with the idea that, hey, I want to get the story out there. But I actually did write it as a textbook. And I knew that eventually it would become a class. And so then, that's the workbook is one of the 5th books in there. So I created the workbook that went right after with Pride Leadership. And then I created the online class. And that was always kind of the plan. I mean, my background's in instructional technology, distance education. So there's kind of like that nerdiness. I kind of knew it was going to be a thing. I didn't know what a thing it was going to be. I mean, I've had my consulting business, Top Dog Learning Group, since 2008, which of course was a really not cool time to start a business, but hey, there you go. And we mainly did, leadership training for a handful of Fortune 500 companies. And now I have, in our 4 areas of focus, now queer leadership is one of them. And it's generating a really nice revenue stream. And then we have the other 3. And so I think when I look at metrics, it's what else can be part of that product line. And how is it when I go to a conference like a Out and Equal or a National Gay and Lesbian Chamber, and people are saying, oh, I read your book, or I just got a review this week from a 5-year-old book saying, this is amazing. Why didn't I have this several years ago? I'm like, bad Steve marketing, but that's okay that it's still resonating with folks. And then, and I watch the comments underneath it, like, I love Steve's book. It's so cheeky humor, but really good stuff. I'm like, perfect. So I think the metrics are a lot of those qualitative versus just the quantitative analysis.
I really appreciate it. We're going to get to the reviews piece in a moment, but Dan, first I'm going to come to you. so much that you've learned between these books. What are you keeping an eye on now that helps you know this book is helping, is actually a success, is getting people's hands?
Yeah, today I refer to my book as my enhanced business card. And I use it to all the time to get people's attention, to follow up on prospect calls. Pretty much everyone I meet with on an initial Zoom call, I end up sending a book to. Out of my own house, I've probably mailed myself over 1,000 books easy. And I just look at it as an enhanced business card. It's got the credibility. It tells people that I'm for real. And then also it has the quantitative measurement absolutely for me has been speaking gigs. And I made a decision in 2022 to focus my entire business on speaking. Interestingly, now, as we come to the end of 2024, I'm doing what you're doing, Steve, which is sort of adding more satellite products and services to it. But there's no question that the book helps book speaking gigs, and also that speaking big gigs help sell books. So both of those things work in tandem. And I was just looking at the numbers recently, and over half of the books that I have sold since this book came out have been in bulk to clients that also hired me to speak. So that's great. And I always look at it as in the whole realm of the enhanced business card is, I'm going to get up on stage and I'm going to inspire, whether it's 50 or 500 or 5,000 people. But if I can also have them walk home with my book and it's sitting in their desk and they're reminded of it and all that, then that's the business card aspect of it, because some of those people down the road will be like, hey, I remember that guy. He was a great speaker. Now I'm going to hire him.
What's also lovely is that people don't throw away books very easily. So your flyer, your business card, your quarter sheet may not even make it into the luggage to go home from the hotel room, because you reach a point where you're like, I took all this stuff, and you're like, what am I going to actually look at when I go home? They're going to take
Robbie, real quick, funny story on this. So, and it's a piece of advice as well. So sometimes I'll go on to Amazon and I will buy up the used copies of my book, the ones that people are selling for like 99 cents, because I don't want anybody thinking that my book is worth 99 cents. So I'll buy the cheap ones up. And one time I got one in the mail and it was signed by me. I was like, wait a second. So somebody got a signed book probably at an event and then went and gave it to Goodwill or did whatever they did. But you're right. Most of the time that doesn't happen, but it was really funny to get that back in the mail.
And then you're like,
David, whoever you are, I'm really mad at you.
You're going to put it right back out to them, to another person with that same first name.
I got to find another David. Yeah.
This is awesome. So I really love the idea of also focusing on book sales, because we don't make money from individual books. I focus only on individual book sales for the launch sequence, when I'm really guiding the launch team to buy the book at a discount and leave their verified review on Amazon. But beyond that point, it really is about opportunities to sell books through speaking, consulting, or coaching packages or book clubs, depending on what the opportunities are in front of you. A big piece of this for me has been reviews. And this has been my happy place. It's not everybody's, but I love the review piece. I'm a book launch strategist. I just see them as social proof, a differentiator, a way to say this book is really valuable. And I know what I'm talking about, especially when you might have a crowded space. And how do you get yourself out there? You've had varying success. I'm going to actually talk to Dan first, because Dan, you've done some really cool things here. I'm seeing, so first of all, folks who are listening, there are ratings, which is the stars, and then there are reviews, which are the written text. And so Dan, you have 142 total ratings and 68 reviews. So the ratio is not awesome, but 68 reviews is awesome and really hard to get over 50 reviews that are written. So did you do a big push at the beginning? Do you help remind people ongoing? Where are those reviews coming from? Is it people or are these organic? Just curious about your process and how intentional you were with it.
Well, first of all, thank you for pointing out the ratio, because when I saw your ratio, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm absolutely a complete failure at this. So congratulations on whatever you're doing. And people should be listening to you and not to me on this. But I will tell you that, I probably don't follow up with as many of those 1,000 people who I've sent free books to as I should, to say, hey, if you liked the book, can you leave a review? I try to remember to do that. Occasionally, as I, send out my weekly newsletter, every couple of months, I might remind people, hey, did you enjoy the Experience Maker? There's still time to leave a review. And I try to tell people, how helpful it is to the author. So oftentimes people, even if they don't tend to leave reviews for products, once they know that it is helpful to me and they like me, then they're more willing to do it. And so that's usually how I'll phrase it. Look, it's funny because one of the things I talk about in my content is that when people love you, they talk about you without you having to ask. Okay. And so that then, of course, makes it a little bit uncomfortable for me to have to ask, because I'm trying not to do that. But when I do ask, I make it sort of about the relationship and about the fact that, look, this is super helpful to me because Amazon or Barnes & Noble or whoever then promotes the book more and more people see it, and this sells more books, and then I get more speeches and et cetera, et cetera. And so you don't think that one review means a whole lot, but it really does, especially when you're talking about, my book's been out 3 years. Actually, today or tomorrow is the launch date 3 years ago of my book. And when you say 68 reviews, my mind goes to, really, that's it? Like, I've been working so hard at this. Shouldn't it be 600 reviews? Because we've sold enough that in theory, the 600 reviews shouldn't be completely out of shot. But I think that people aren't, it's not something that they're accustomed to doing often. And so sometimes you do have to make that little personal plea. And that's been helpful.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely clear that you set the intention up front. I heard you also say launch date. And I'll just say, for those who are listening, in my mind, your publication date is not your launch date. You want to leave ideally 2.5, 3 weeks between when the book becomes available for sale and when you tell everyone about it. And in between is when you drive your launch team members to publish their reviews. Because then when you go tell the world then comes and sees it, and it's already successful. It's got sales, it's got reviews. It may have hit number 1, which is sort of a byproduct of this process, not the focus. All right, Steve, I'm going to come over to you now. So Steve, you have been at this for a little bit, and you have a perfect ratio, 11 and 11. But you probably worked really hard for those 11. I mean, tell us a little bit about how you did that.
That was like beg, borrowing, and stealing friends and guilting them, because just like Dan said, people don't understand the importance of what that looks like. And that was actually part of the strategy. When we launched Pride Leadership, it was very organic. And I think there's like 60 plus reviews in it, which was great. And many of those I didn't bribe people or I don't know them. So I'm like, yay. But for your career, exactly what you just said, Robbie, we really were strategic in thinking, kind of soft launch versus like tell the world it's out there. And, one of the things that I did at the recommendation of my team was, I had my list of, they said at least, I think I had to get at least 8 or something like that was the target. I'm like, I'm going to get more than that. But I actually had a Google Doc and I wrote some testimonials and I, sent that to everybody, said, you can use these. I don't care. You can copy paste them, just put your name next to it so we don't do the same thing, or write your own. That's totally fine. And just doing those little things, some people took me up on my offer, some people didn't, but doing the things that make it an easy lift for the reviewers, I think was really key into actually getting some of those reviews.
Just because I want to hold myself accountable, I'm going to say this on air, so I haven't done recently. My last book came out in March of 2023. There are 253 ratings, and I'm going to go take a peek to see there are 250 reviews. The last one just came in. I was really, really hoping for that one. It took me 6 months to get that one more review to get to 250. And I partly ended up in this role of a book launch strategist because my mentor said, why aren't you doing that? When I complained tongue in cheek about the fact that it was taking so long to get to 250. She's like, that's problems that you have. Most people don't have. Right, a lot of this is hand-holding, and I'll talk in a moment about how I move people through that process and who am I even inviting. So Nikki, you did pretty good here. You also have a bunch of reviews. You've got 17 ratings and 13 reviews. I imagine it takes effort. I mean, memoirs are maybe even a little harder because it's not a product like a step-by-step guide, like something that Dan's doing where people can say, I tangibly benefited from this in this way. But clearly there's a lot from it that people can learn. How do you approach people about reviews, and has this been part of your strategy?
So initially it wasn't a part of my strategy because I knew nothing. So my mom gave me a 5-star review. Thanks,
hey, Mom.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask Mom. Darn it.
Yeah, right. And then I'm a part of a Bookstagram like chat for North Carolina people who like to read a lot, and my fellow women were like, "Oh, well, if you send us a review or a free copy, I'll do a review for you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, that would be cool." So a couple of them were from friends from Bookstagram, like 2. The rest of them are totally organic. I actually don't know who some of those people are. I have no idea who they are, how they found my book, nothing. Something went well.
I'm
I
going
wish
to
I knew
actually
what it
give a
was.
shout out. I noticed his name pop up in a lot of reviews as I've been going and doing these shows. Bruce Shear. Bruce Shear, I hope you listen to this show. I'll have to send it to him. So Bruce has written reviews for most of the authors that I have interviewed. So he is steadily, I actually was trying to find his list of all of his reviews. It wasn't showing up, but his name's been popping up in July when we did a push for reviews around the Amazon Prime Days, the Kindle cross promotion campaign, which is what you and we all met through that. We all lowered our prices to 99 cents. He bought all these books and he wrote a slew of reviews that month. And so for some people, it was like the only review that they had, but it's so cool that there are people out there who get it. And I think that's the thing. Content creators understand, whether it's books or podcasts, whatever it is, that getting that response back is really helpful. Here's the piece that I think a lot of authors miss. It's not as helpful to get reviews from friends and family and fellow authors and such, because they don't have access to budgets. They don't have the need for the services you're providing, and they probably don't have people to refer you to either. Even the Amazon rules are not to get people who know you well. Like, you can't have a review that says, "I'm your aunt and I love you dearly, which is why I'm writing you a review." Like, that's not gonna work for Amazon. Or "I've known you since kindergarten," like all that stuff. So I make an effort with my clients and for my books to help authors build launch teams filled with likely prospects and likely referral partners from their existing network. And that's been the basis of all the work that I do with my coaching clients and my book launch clients, because that way they're actually having conversations with those people over a couple of months. Whether the review gets written or not, it tends to lead to new opportunities, media opportunities, revenue opportunities. So it's time well spent, but it is a lot of time, and it is a big undertaking. I aim for my authors to get 50 or more reviews because it requires a certain level of structure and process. But the goal isn't real. I mean, it's the goal is the reviews, but it's really about them having those conversations and re-engaging with their network, because that's what builds the pipeline for what comes after. Dan, come on to the conversation.
Well, Robbie, the thing that's killing me that I got to understand from you, obviously you work really hard to get the written reviews and you're very successful at it. What I can't figure out, though, is why aren't there more people who have read your book that just do the simple thing and click on the 5 stars and move on? You have like almost none of those people. So how is that happening?
Right, because there's only 3 people who didn't write a review. Well, one person wrote a 1-star review that said wokeness at its best. And honestly, I think it'll make some people want to read my book. So
that's
that's
like
good.
#slay. Like,
Yeah.
wokeness at its best, #slay. I
Yeah.
feel like that's a good thing.
I know. I want to take a screenshot of that. Steve.
Just to that exact point, my last book, Pride Leadership, actually got banned in Congress, and I was so upset. My publisher kind of hit me a message, and she's like, "We're doing a press release right now." And so that negativity, like that 1 star you got, it led to like a big bump in sales. So I'm like, yay.
And I'll tell you from a customer
stars.
Just from a customer service perspective, lots of data shows this. You do not want all 5 stars because people don't believe it. Yep. And so when you get that, I remember cheering when I got my first 3-star review. I was like, all right, thank goodness. Now it looks more reasonable.
It's true that right now I have a 5 out of 5. There's a couple of 4s, but not enough to throw off. There's 6 4-star ratings, but it's 6 out of 253, right? So it's not going to throw the numbers off. But I do think that probably they get looked at more than all the other ones. And it's people who strategically wrote a good review, but gave it 4 stars. And it really does stand out. It makes me think I should start doing that for my friends. I think that I just really push for reviews. And what happens is books that have reviews tend to get more organic reviews. So it's not the most scientific answer for you, Dan, but that's kind of what happens. That as reviews go past 80, 90, 100 reviews, people who get the book then are inspired to add their commentary into the mix. I set a real goal for getting over 200 reviews for my last book, and I built a launch team of over 600 people to do it. So, Nikki, let me bring you back in.
I just want to point out that one of the things that contributed to the success of my book online was that somebody took a picture with it and put it in their review. That's huge. Like that one little thing. I have 2 pictures now. I'm so excited. I didn't ask for either
little
of them.
videos. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to point out that if you're going to come do the Kindle cross promotion again with us, that's about a 2-week period that your book's going to be 99 cents. I'm telling my own clients to focus on getting more reviews between now and US Thanksgiving. So in that like first 2 weeks of November when their book's discounted, and then we're going to drive traffic to their book through the cross promotion on Black Friday. So just kind of, you know, aim for whatever, 5 more reviews or 10 reviews or whatever you can sort of make happen. Obviously you can get a whole 50 in 2 weeks if you really had a structure around it. But I mean, yes, and then it's also about getting the verified reviews. If you send people a book, they're not going to necessarily buy a book. And then too many of those is also problematic. So it's a whole thing. I'm going to move away from reviews, even though I could talk about this all day. I would love to know, Nikki, I'm going to bring this question to you first. What was challenging other than getting reviews? I mean, for you, you started from scratch. You didn't really have an audience. You didn't know maybe a lot of fellow authors. What was hard about this? There's sort of the writing phase, the publishing phase, the marketing phase, like all the above. What would you say?
So writing wasn't that hard. I was motivated. So I wrote the first draft in 8 days, 52,000 words, 8 days. I was motivated, which is another story. But the editing part, I was prepared for. The publishing part, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I got through it. What I wasn't ready for was the marketing phase or the level of rejection from publishers, because the publisher that I talked to that gave me the best feedback that absolutely broke my heart was, you have a fantastic message. You're a very gifted writer. You have no audience and we can't take you. And I'm like, oh, but at least they said I was a good writer. So that's something.
I think this is why self-publishing is so popular, because there is a very high bar for being selected by a traditional publisher, and even some hybrid publishers who are doing the imprint for you. And even with all of that, it's not like being selected for a traditional publisher means that you're going to do a ton of marketing. They only do a ton of marketing for a small percentage of their overall authors. So really it is on us as authors to come with a plan. Steve, what was the biggest challenge for you when it came to this whole author journey?
I probably have to second what Nikki said as far as the marketing piece, even though I kind of knew some of that. But one of my goals for at least Pride Leadership was I wanted to get #1 bestseller and I wanted to win awards, just because I thought that was added street cred. I could, for that book, I could not crack the Amazon bestseller thing. I did for Your Career, but again, I learned things. So that was kind of cool. But I did get 2 awards for Pride Leadership. And that was really cool, but it was really hard to find the opportunities. And then of course, to do the whole process to apply and all that good stuff. And of course, each time you're sending a book and usually some sort of entry fee. But I found that has given so much street cred for, when I'm being introduced for a keynote or whatever. And now we can say award-winning and now best-selling author, ... And that's really meeting the goal of my book, which really was more about adding to that thought leadership, which of course led to the other stuff.
I always caution people a little bit about the bestseller thing, because it can be, 1 hour. And of course, most people think we're talking about New York Times bestseller. And if you are a New York Times bestseller, yes, put that on your cover, because that's something that a traditional publisher would do. But no traditional publisher would put #1 Amazon bestseller or #1 international bestseller. Like, that means nothing in the world of traditional publishing. So we're really calling attention to the fact that these books are being either self-published or hybrid published with a smaller hybrid publisher. So I have hit #1 30 times across 4 countries for my 3 books. My last book hit #1 18 times across 3 countries. So I say that whole sentence. Then I hit #1 bestseller 30 times across these countries. I never say international bestseller because what does it actually mean? So it is sort of a funny thing where we want these accolades, and the same thing with the awards. I think the awards are great. I did finally get out of my own way and apply for my third book, but I only applied to one place, did a ton of research, decided on the Nonfiction Authors Association, thought that sounded really credible. I then bought the stickers, which is funny, right? Because they sell you the sticker afterwards. I don't need 4,000 stickers, but I have them. And then I also bought the membership for a year to see if I want to hang out with them, right? So, but I have a friend who's like on award 7, and I don't understand what the value is, because once you can say award winning, you don't need a second one. Like, I don't know how many more places you need to get affirmed, external validation and all of that. Dan, what was your biggest challenge when it came to this author journey you've been on?
Well, some of it was related to this. I mean, I have never called myself a best-selling author, but I also don't correct other people that call me that. So that's kind of that's my hybrid model. But yeah, I mean, most of my career before I got into customer experience, I was in marketing, and I have led teams in every marketing channel from direct mail through SEO and social media. And I can say with full authority that the single hardest thing to market in the world is yourself, both as an author and as a speaker. And that, I think, was surprising to me, that it is, I'm like, I know how to do this. I've been marketing for 20 years. And yet when it's your own product, you're too close to it. And so I think where I had some struggle was then, who do you trust with your baby? Right? And who do you say, okay, I know I need some help marketing this, but where am I going to put my faith, and where am I going to invest to have somebody else help me do this? And I think that was a bigger challenge than I expected. I ended up spending, I believe, way too much money at launch and didn't see the return for it. And so the next time I'm going to go at it a very different way, because of sort of what I learned, and the fact that, hey, you don't actually need to spend as much money as I spent. And so all three of us are saying marketing in different ways, but absolutely for me, even as a marketer, I thought it was the hardest part.
Well, I think for you, the hard part is, how the sausage is made. So you also can't just let anyone do something, because you kind of know what they're trying to say and do. And you're like, well, all right, is that really a thing? I mean, I have these really strong opinions now, because for me, sending the PR piece, which is usually publishers, their job is to publish your book, and then they hand you off to a PR firm or podcast guest placements, or they talk to you about ads, which are all different angles of marketing. But they're skipping the launch piece, which is around getting the reviews and getting the word out to your street team and all of that. And I just think, wow, you're spending, like, I've had people pitch to be on my podcast when they've got 7 ratings and 4 reviews. They paid a hybrid publisher to get published. They paid a reputable PR company to be pitched to me. And I know the prices. I know what these things cost. They've spent 20 grand at least, and they haven't made any effort to engage their own network. And it's sort of like, there's this piece of me. Oh, and by the way, it's a book about networking, right? Like always happens.
Womp, womp.
I'm like, So I just think this is, again, authors have to have a plan for how to engage their own network around this, because that's where you're going to get your early sales or your early opportunities to do a speaking opportunity or to get on podcasts. It's going to be who you know. Steve, let me bring you in here before I shift to the next question. Steve, did you have something you wanted to add? Oh, okay. Let me jump to the next question. That's fine. I thought I saw a little hand wave. All right. So I would love to know, and I'm going to actually, Steve, I'll bring this question to you. I want to know how tightly you were able to have your books, plural, support your business goals. Were you clear about that as you were writing the book? And is there a really clear pipeline? Like, if I'm reading a book of yours and I'm like, oh, this is amazing, is it clear how I then connect with you and what else I can do with you? And were you clear about that at the start of the journey? Was that something you had to build in the back? All right. So share a little bit about how.
Totally honest, I was not clear. Like I said, I knew I wanted to create this book to be a textbook. And having been a college professor, you saw college professors do that. They'll write the book that they use in their class, and that you've built in audience, which I thought was actually kind of smart, but annoying as an undergrad and all that good stuff. But I knew that this would be something, and that's about as far as I got. And then I started creating the online class. I'm like, oh, I need a workbook. So then I created the workbook, and then it just became this whole thing. And I started, people would come into my leadership class, my LGBT leadership class, and they were like, oh, well, do you have any other things? I'm like, I do. And so, it started just becoming this big thing. I have my own learning management system, so that was really easy to get stuff up there. Then I created the audiobook, that's a whole other conversation. We can go down that path, but it really did. Once I got to Your Queer Career, it's a pyramid scheme in a great way. So I know that people, if they come in with Your Queer Career, they're going to go to the Lions program because both my books talk to each other on purpose. I use the same 6 leadership competency model in both books on purpose. If you're not watching, there's like the rainbow flag. Those are the 6 competencies. So branding is there. I have swag that I created just for the heck of it because it was fun, and it sells to some people, not a lot, but like little things. So it became more of this massive brand versus just this one book. I got really fortunate too that the cover design for Pride Leadership is this beautiful rainbow lion head that just looks great on everything. I mean, I have it on mugs, it's on t-shirts. I have little lapel pins when people graduate from the online leadership program that they get. And it just became this big thing. And now, as the gay leadership dude, which is my self-described title, people know that, oh, that's right, he's the gay leadership dude. He wrote those books on queer leadership. Oh, awesome. And it really became this bigger brand than I really expected.
You create a whole ecosystem. The cottage industry off the book. I love that. Dan, how did you approach the book and how it would relate back to a business? When you first wrote your first book, you were still at a job. You weren't really thinking about it. But as you approached this book, was it something a little different?
Well, first of all, I love the gay leadership dude. I think that's so great. I hope you're trademarking that because this is
100%,
fantastic.
100%.
And interestingly, in my business, the book is called The Experience Maker. My business is called The Experience Maker. One of the things that I didn't foresee was that people started calling me the Experience Maker. So even as I got introduced on stage, Dan Gingiss, the Experience Maker. For a while, I was like, all right, cool. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that nickname. And then I realized that was all wrong, that it's not about the fact that I'm an experience maker. It's about the fact that I help other people become the experience maker. And as soon as I figured that out, I actually changed my keynote around this as well. And it was a big success because now people leave my keynote feeling like they have accomplished something, or a workshop or a course, or that they have accomplished becoming the experience maker. And even what I say at the end is that once I have everybody pledged to being the experience maker themselves, my last line is, I'm Dan Gingiss, and I too am an experience maker. So I'm with you. I'm part of this whole club, right? And so I thought that was really interesting. And it did take me probably, I don't know, a year and a half after the book was published to flip that around the right way. And actually, I haven't told anybody this yet. So breaking news, Robbie, I'm working on releasing a second edition of my book. And that's in the back of my head now in the second edition, is really trying to make sure the book itself is focused on the reader becoming the experience maker, not that they're reading a book by the experience maker. And again, that wasn't intentional, but it's fascinating the things that you learn along the way. From a business perspective, as I said before, it has for me intentionally all been about speaking. And just now in 2024, I'm working to expand that because my belief was I needed to build the speaking business up to a reasonable enough level that it could, that it was enough to keep the business going so that I could then build things underneath it. And also a little bit of it, as any entrepreneur figures out at some point, was I was trying to do too many things at once. I was building courses, and I was trying to sell books, and I was trying to sell workshops and speeches and all this stuff. And what I realized was I didn't think I was doing any of it very well. And so when I decided in 2022 to only focus on selling speeches, shocker, I got good at it. My speaking business went way up. And only now at a more position of strength can I say, hey, we should add some satellite things around this because now I can spend a little bit more time on it. So that was, I think, a learning thing as well, is that oftentimes, look, launching a book alone is a full-time job. And then when you try to add on to it, I want to make sure that these people also, get my freebies, and then they get and they sign up for my course, and I've got webinars, and I've got this, and I've got this, and I've got this. It's like there's just too much going on for any one person to manage.
in the future, you're going to be able to do that because you'll already have all this in place. It's hard to do it first, but I love what you just shared. And I think anyone listening will probably feel relieved that they're not supposed to be doing 6 things at once. It's not actually how any of us get to the end product. Nikki, what's the biggest win, biggest success you've gotten from writing this book? Is a certain door opened, an opportunity for you? What's been like, only because of this book, X happened?
I would say that the unintended consequence of writing a book is that you get extra credit from people. And people think that I'm smarter. I am smart. I don't know why they didn't believe me before I published a book, but now they believe me. And because it is a very expensive business card, I've gotten to do really cool things. I got to give a TED Talk. I got started in speaking because I wrote the book. I didn't ask for speaking engagements. They kind of fell in my lap and I ran with it, which is my career plan, followed the white rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
So
very cool. I love that it did not maybe get you all the way to the mountaintop of the New York Times bestseller, but it opened you up to lots of possibilities and you said yes to them. So in a moment, I'm going to go back to Dan and ask him what advice he's going to give someone who's writing a book to help them grow a business. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, Dan, what advice would you give someone who's writing a book to help them grow a business?
Well, I think the first thing is to believe in what you're writing. And I think Nikki said this really nicely, is that, I believe that almost everybody's got something to say. The question is, are you saying something that somebody needs to hear? And I think that's the real challenge. I was a little bit fortunate writing a business book because I think there is a little bit more of a built-in audience, and I came from business, so I sort of knew that there were people out there that did need to hear this message. But I think that, so many people start writing a book or dream of writing a book, or maybe, think about it, but never start. And I do think just sitting down with pen to paper or finger to keyboard is so important. I'm very impressed and jealous that Nikki wrote 52,000 words in 8 days. I'd like to figure out how to do that. But I actually wrote most of my book during COVID because I had nothing else to do. So I wrote mine at least in about 4 months, which I thought was impressive. But in terms of the business piece, I think that it is, we've said it in different ways in this conversation, is go in with reasonable expectations. Very few of us are going to become New York Times bestsellers or even Wall Street Journal or even USA Today. And while it's great to have those dreams, I wanted Wall Street Journal. That was my goal because I was writing a business book. I didn't get it. Does that make me a failure? No, because my book has done other things like help me book lots of speeches. So I think going in with realistic expectations is really important. And then figuring out how to take your book and create other business pieces or content pieces from it. I always joke with people and say, if you don't want to buy my book, basically just scour the internet, and essentially everything that I wrote in the book has been reprinted in different places, either on my own blog or when I was writing for Forbes or in an interview on a podcast. You can pretty much piece it together if you want, because I have reused and recycled all of this content. It's great content, so why not? But that's how you have to think about your book, is that your book isn't the business. It's the vehicle behind the business.
I appreciate everything you're saying there. And I'm thinking about how people who want to hit #1 bestseller in one of these name brands, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, they don't know there's a whole business behind doing that. Like, if you want that to happen, there are companies that will help you. It's just like the Amazon #1 thing can be gamified. And if you know how it works, it's not hard to do. You can sell less than 12 copies in some categories and hit #1. But is it the right category for your book and all this? I mean, I think some of it sometimes is bogus, which is also why it's hard for me to put any kind of real strength in it, because I know people are playing games. But even the New York Times, like, I only know a few people who genuinely just done it because they had massive audiences. But if you don't have a massive audience, then it's a lot harder to pull off, and you end up hiring a company to help you work the system in some way. And but you have to really put money behind it. So it's really funny because you know, for you, the end result is you got more business. And that is ultimately what you wanted your book to do, which is like, it's funny how when we first write a book, we don't think of it that way, but that is true success, revenue that you added to your bank account. I'm going to come to you, Nikki, ask you the same thing. What advice would you give someone who's writing a book to help them grow a business?
I would think about the book as a part of your sales funnel. And I didn't do this, but now it is something that I think about. That actually, one of the books from the cross promotion event, Think Like a Marketer, helped me put a customer journey together, and that has been really helpful. So as I'm working on my next book, I'm using it as a way to introduce myself and my services to my customers so that they go to XYZ and do whatever. It's a really nice addition to the funnel. So think about it strategically.
Kate Colbert wrote the book Think Like a Marketer. I'm hoping she comes and participates in our Kindle cross promotion again, which I think she will. It's a great book, and it's another one of those examples. That's a book she wrote a while ago, totally evergreen content.
Yeah.
She's written books since, but this Kindle cross promotion has been a great way to wake up and re-engage not just that book, but the author's enthusiasm for that book that they've sort of put aside, because, you know, we move on, we have to stay interested, right? So we like keep creating new things, but it turns out some of that stuff we wrote 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago is still what people need. So Steve, same question to you. What is the advice you'd give someone who's writing a book?
Well, what's funny, Robbie, you and Dan kind of already alluded to it. I would guarantee you've already been writing a book. If you're a business person, something like a blog, an article, whatever. And I know when I was writing Pride Leadership, and I kind of step back, like, okay, what would someone need to know? I'm like, oh wait, I wrote that training class. Let me grab the script out of it, and you can start massaging it and organizing it. And of course, you know, the outcome is probably going to be slightly different, but you're already writing that content. So repurpose that. Former Disney, we never said steal. You always repurpose things. And so repurpose that. But then with the idea that what are you going to do after the book is launched? What's going to happen after that book has been on the shelf, virtual or otherwise, for 6, 12 months? What is that next step? What is that ecosystem going to look like? I know for going into your career, having that benefit of hindsight, I wrote that book and the style because I know I can rinse and repeat it. You know, the idea behind that book is it's questions people have been asking me for the last couple of years. So now for volume 2, I've already started writing it. You know, not very focused, but I'll have a coaching session. And say, Steve, I have a question. I'm like, what is it? And they'll give me, I'm like, ooh, that's a really good question. I'll write it down in an Excel spreadsheet. I'm already starting to fill up the content for the next book. And so start to think a couple steps ahead before you just go in and short-sighted, oh, my book's done, I'm finished.
That's great. I mean, repurposing and not having to start from scratch, staring at that blank page, like I alluded to in the beginning, is so much better. So Steve, how can people find you and follow your work?
The easiest way to find me is to go to our main landing page, topdoglearning.biz. You can kind of learn more about me, about my books, our training classes, my consulting team, Top Dogs or Top Doggers, and learn from us, topdoglearning.biz.
Awesome. Nikki, how about you? How can people find you and follow your work?
Yeah, you can always go to my website, NikkiSoulsby.com, or follow me almost anywhere at Nikki Soulsby Author.
And by the way, I'm going to put all these links in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Nikki, I'm going to include a link to your TEDx talk that you did, which is awesome, The Power of Doubt. And Dan, what about you? How can people find you and follow your work?
Shockingly, dangingiss.com is the best place to go. Although if you can't remember that, but you can remember the Experience Maker, just go to theexperiencemaker.com and it'll take you right to dangingiss.com. So either one of those will work. And then I'm most active on LinkedIn in terms of content. So if you want to continue getting content from me, that's the place to tune in.
Great. Like I mentioned to you, all those links will be in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com, which is where you'll also get an invitation to one of our upcoming free virtual networking events for writers and authors, which is a chance for you to meet each other and our hub partners. Our hub partners, there's more than 50 of them. They're waiting to help entrepreneurs become successful authors, helping you navigate the complexities of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing a business book. Do not do this journey alone. Go find your community of people who are going to help you make it happen. And we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And thanks to our panelists.